Good morning, everybody. Is that gonna work? Yes. Welcome to Not Tech First. This is, for those that you don't know, we usually have a random GIF at the beginning of the talk. This one is to celebrate UK bank holidays. It's a long weekend. Did you know? I thought I'd actually do a bit of preparation today, Alec and Yvette, because you know I'm normally unprepared for these sessions. So, did you know we used to have 33 bank holidays? 33.
Wow. I don't know how many we have now. How many do we have now, Paul?
8, is it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but and then someone decided that wasn't a good idea and reduced it down to 4.
One extreme to the other.
And we do actually have a banker to thank for bank holidays. It's Sir John Lubbock, who authored the Bank Holidays Act of 1871. And for a while, bank holidays were actually called St. Lubbock's Day, which obviously didn't stick. Although I do quite like that. It's like a Lubbock's Day. Yay! Sounds better than a bank holiday, right? I think.
You excelled yourself, Paul, there.
Yeah. You know. I just got caught up in the moment. It was seemed like an interesting topic. Anyway, really excited to see lots of new people here attending this month. Welcome to Not Tech First if this is your first time, and welcome if it's your second or third or your 5th or your 10th time as well. For those that you don't know, we are a flock of techie design, people-centered, coffee-loving early birds who get together once a month to hear great speakers, usually Nottingham-based, share their wisdom and chat about all things tech over breakfast. This is a free event, and we used to be based in our office, which is in the middle of Nottingham, and offer people a free breakfast and coffee to tempt them out of the bed. But obviously, since April 2020, was it now? We've been fully remote. But we've had a range of lots of different topics, 20 plus speakers, I think now, talking about all sorts of things to do with tech and design, including things like design thinking, change management, service design, testing, data visualization, virtual audio reality, lots of different kind of themes and topics. And we do try to keep it quite broad to interest lots of different people from different areas. But our aim is really to start the day, help you start your day right with a bit of insight and maybe some light entertainment if Alex is going to do a little song for us later. Maybe, we'll see. You can chat with us. So we are on the Tech Nottingham Slack channel, and you can chat with us there on Tech First Monthly, and Alex is going to be monitoring that channel. But you can also give us a tweet on Twitter. We will be sending some tweets out, and hopefully Yvette will be crafting some marvelous drawing as we go along through the session. And we have also got a bunch of stuff happening in Knots this month, Yvette. So how did the VR experience go last month? Was it good? We can't hear you, Yvette.
Oh, more technical difficulties.
You're very quiet.
Hang on. Can you hear me now?
Still very quiet.
This is not going well now. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're really quiet. Shall we go on to the leads?
Yeah.
Thing? See if we can.
Don't say the leads thing. You've spoiled it. Oh, a big reveal.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, leads digital first. Well, interestingly enough, someone said, I think via Twitter this week, hey, I'm not from Nottingham, but can I join Not's Tech First? I said, of course you can, unless you're from Derby. I'm joking. But, you know, we're promoting events throughout the region and everything's remote still generally. So wanted to talk about Leeds Digital Festival, which is a great, gathering of talks across, you know, AI, data, design thinking, a real broad range of things. I think even Paul, you've spoken at Leeds Digital Fest before, have you? Yeah.
Last year, yeah. I spoke about design, being a parent and using design thinking to overcome the challenges of children.
Yeah, sounds insightful. And they're running for a few weeks from 20th of September. The speakers will be announced next week, so have a look at the website. You can sign up for alerts and things like that, and hear about the speakers as they come along. Any spoilers, Paul? You haven't been asked back for a second year, have you?
No.
No, okay, fair
enough for them, I think.
Yeah, once a decade, maybe. I'll come around. But yeah, check them out and have a look on there, because there's some really fab talks if you're interested in tech and design.
Yvette, you want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
You're back.
Oh. So zero latency lasts time. It's a VR place in Vicky Centre. And we went there, it's just me and my husband, and it was amazing. It was really good, actually. It's like being on the holodeck of Starship Enterprise, if anyone's familiar with that. But you put your headset on, you go in, and you're surrounded by zombies, and you're just shooting everybody with various weapons. The funniest thing was that I actually couldn't move off the platform because I was scared of heights. I didn't factor that in, and even though I knew I was on a kind of flat-based warehouse, kind of floor, I actually just couldn't move, so I had to just sit there stealthily snipering them. But yeah, really good. So if anyone didn't do that, the offer is still on. So if you go back to the meetup groups, you can still see that discount code, and you should definitely go, whether it's team building or whatever, or on your own, families, whatever, go. Sticking with the theme of summer holidays, because we are still in it, I just thought, okay, we'll keep it to gaming and sort of like kind of fun days out. So the first one is Houdini's Escape Room and Spa, which is just outside of Nottingham, actually, just in Kegworth. But they're offering an escape room and a spa day, and I thought, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that? And it's quite reasonably priced as well. So again, 20% off any additional purchases. So so I put the link there for those of you that don't want to go to Kegworth or don't want to go. They actually do an online event as well. So you can't have the spa. You could probably sit there in a robe and your slippers, but they do have an online event as well for anybody that wants to kind of do an online escape room. So I put that link as well. And then just kind of people that probably aren't familiar with Nottingham, or people that just didn't know this thing existed, in the corner house there's a massive fun station, which is like basically arcades and stuff like that. So anyone who's kind of getting to the end of the summer holidays and wants somewhere to go with their kids, Nottingham does offer this really fantastic kind of area where the kids can go, and you get tickets and you can get loads of like stuff. And I think they do say key rings to iPads. Every time I've gone, I've not won an iPad, but with us all being techies, I think, if we go, we might be lucky. So yeah, so I thought I'd put those in notable knots this time, because it is still some holidays, and whether you're a parent or not, all of these things are accessible to you. So
maybe we could start a ticket collection of it and see how many tickets we need to get that iPad.
Yeah, we should. Tech fast communal ticketing. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, let's do that. So yeah.
Thank you. So if you want to speak at TechFest, if you're inspired by Nichole's talk today, we really encourage people from the local community to come and talk about their burning passions. And if you are interested, then please feel free to drop either myself, Yvette, or Alec a message, and you can contact us via Twitter or any other channel that you see fit.
We are actually booked up for this year, aren't we? So we're looking at next year. So you've got plenty of time to perfect that talk, should you want to do one next year.
Yeah, even if you've just got a rough idea, we're happy to spend some time with you to help you shape it and to give you some feedback and allow you practice sessions and that sort of thing. So even if you're fairly new to speaking, don't be afraid to kind of reach out. We're happy to help. If you have missed any of the previous talks, since we've been recording them, since April, since we've been doing them remotely, we've been adding them onto our YouTube channel, which has now got the amazing number of 52 subscribers. I think that's an increase of 2 on last month, Alex. Thought you might be impressed by that. And some of those talks actually have got quite a lot of views. I think Rob Van Tol's Home Working talks now around 210 views, I think. And at that, I think your talks reached over 100. This month as well.
No way.
Yeah.
So all our family are just refreshing it.
Yeah, just every yeah.
So yeah,
Thanks,
those talks are there, and today's talk will be going on there as well. So you can flick back into it if you miss anything. So today we've got the amazing Nichole Browne. Nichole's a user researcher and accessibility lead for the Driver and Vehicle Standard Agency. and she's been helping organisations meet their goals by helping end users meet theirs. I've had the great pleasure of working alongside Nichole at DVSA for a period of time, and then firsthand seen some of the great work that she's been doing and how she's been championing in accessibility and actually making it an integral part of the design and development process. So I'm really pleased that she's joined us today and is going to share some of the insights and some of the approaches that she's taken at DVSA over the last few years. So welcome, Nichole.
Thanks very much, Paul. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. So now's the slightly clumsy bit where we exchange screens. So let's do that.
We've got all the clumsy technology bits out of the way before you, Nichole. Just to, you know, look, like smooth perfection. There you go.
Great, Paul. Hopefully you've given me a thumbs up that it's there. Yep.
Yeah, you can see.
Great. Okay, thank you. Well, thanks everybody for inviting me here today and giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what's been going on in our accessibility work at the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency over the last about 3 years now. There we go. Let's move on. Why can't we move on? There we go. Right. We've now got the second clumsy bit out of the way, which is actually the slide transition. So I'm going to start off just by telling you a little bit about the DVSA, so the Driver, Vehicle and Standards Agency. So we're responsible for the 1.9 million driving tests that are taken each year. And in fact, our theory test is the largest computer-based test in the world. We also issue around 38.5 million MOT certificates a year and make 280,000 roadside stops to tackle dangerous and defective vehicles. So we're not the DVLA, that's where you send your licenses and logbooks, or the DVSA with a big road safety agenda. So I'm also going to tell you a little bit about our team. So I work in the service design team. There are about 12 of us, I think, and we're researchers, designers, performance analysts, business analysts, and we're embedded in our digital service teams, providing service design guidance and skills to them. So in those teams, we're all in CI, continuous improvement. So we're iterating our services regularly based on user needs, regulatory change and DVSA policy. But as well as that responsibility into the service teams, we also have an organisational wide responsibility for the user-centred design community. And we're also very active in spearheading the accessibility work. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? So I've got 3 main topics. First of all, we'll do a bit of an intro around accessibility and get in the zone. Then I'm going to share with you 5 of the kinds of nudge that we use in our organisation to raise awareness of accessibility and get commitment to accessibility action. And we'll finish off by talking about why accessibility should matter to you as well. So just starting off with accessibility then. So the first thing I'd like you to do is a little kind of self-reflective awareness activity. Just take a couple of moments to notice what image comes to mind when you think of a disabled person. So just let that image form for a moment and notice what it is. And we're going to come back to that at the end of the talk. Okay, so when we talk about accessibility, we often hear things like this. Please make sure that people with disabilities never feel excluded from the digital age. And obviously this is a very heartfelt plea and it's a very valid plea, but our response to it is something that I'd like to challenge us about. This kind of plea, I think, evokes a charitable model of accessibility. When people talk to us like this, we tend to think that we're going to do something for them. And that's what I mean about it being quite a charitable transaction. And I think that's quite limiting in terms of how far we can go with accessibility thinking. And it's much more productive, much better, I think, if we can think about it in wider terms. So I'm going to contrast this kind of statement with the next one. So this is from Kat Holmes. She's a wonderful accessibility practitioner. I think she's still at Microsoft. And she says, when we design for inclusion, we're designing for our future selves and our ever-changing abilities. And I think this allows us to recognise that people are often disabled by the environments that they're in and the way that the services are put together that they're trying to use. And so now that gives us much more scope to understand where accessibility impacts happen and what we can do about them. And it moves us away from that charitable model that we started with to thinking that accessibility is actually good for all. So I'm now just going to investigate some accessibility statistics with you. And as I talk about these, again, I'd like you to think with these two pictures, which one of these pictures do you instinctively associate the statistic and what it means for you? Which one are you drawn to when you think about this? So here come the statistics. First one, 10 to 16% of the UK population is dyslexic. 1 in 5 adults struggles to read and write. 1 in 9 over 60s is living with sight loss. 68% of us wear glasses or contact lenses, but 1 in 10 of us confesses that they don't actually wear them when they should. 1% of the UK population is on the autistic spectrum, and 15.5 million working days every year are lost to stress, anxiety, or depression. So again, I think those statistics help break us out of a tight view of accessibility, start to understand the breadth of it. And I think, this was my experience when I first experienced this, that I was instinctively drawn to one or other of these kind of images as I was thinking about each statistic. And I think that helps to show us that we all carry some unconscious bias when we're thinking about accessibility, and it affects the way that we act and can potentially limit how much action we can take. So what we want to do is try and break through that unconscious bias and see accessibility in a wider picture. And part of the problem is that we often think about disability as permanent, as visible, and as affecting a minority of people. And certainly at the DVSA a few years ago, we used to encounter that all the time. Stakeholders would say to us, but we're all about vehicles and drivers and big machines on the roads. We can't possibly have any blind users. And so we needed to really challenge that and look more widely at where accessibility and access needs crop up. So it's helpful to think about disability as a continuum. So yes, of course, there are people who have permanent disability, and they do need things to be made simpler and made more accessible. But there are also people who have access needs because of some temporary thing, maybe some injury, or they find that they have access needs because of the particular situation they're in when they're trying to access a product or a service. So again, if we think about disability on a continuum, it harks back to that point I made a couple of slides ago: accessibility is good for all. So another thing I like to do is try and get people to think about people in their organisation or people that they've known, and start to see disability as an experience that people that they know have. So we'll start off with this. Can you recognise any of these people in your organisation? So these are fictitious personas based on the DVSA, but see whether you can relate to any in your realm of contacts. So we'll start with Martine, who's a finance assistant and is hard of hearing. Then we've got Alex, a traffic examiner with repetitive strain injury. And Pavel, a policy advisor with ADHD and dyspraxia. And finally, Jan, a caseworker with low vision, hand tremor, and mild short-term memory loss. Now, people sometimes find it difficult to relate to these. And again, I'm going to bring that back to the fact that here we're talking about permanent disability, and it puts people again in a corner, in a minority. So let's challenge that with this view. So now Martine has an ear infection. Alex is having physiotherapy following an accident. Pavel has a migraine, and Jan is undergoing chemotherapy. So these people face very similar challenges to the first set of people, but we can relate to these people much more. So it's very useful to use that continuum to help us relate more widely. Okay, so I'm going to now move on to talking about 5 of the kinds of nudge that we use in the organisation to get people to think and act around accessibility. The first one is empathy sessions. We've got 2 great sets of empathy kits in our organisation. On the left are the visual impairment simulation glasses. This is a set of 10 glasses that you can wear that give you a feeling of the kinds of challenge that you might experience if you have different visual impairments. And those might include cataracts, macular degeneration, loss of part of your visual field because of a stroke, tunnel vision. There's 10 different experiences that you can have with those. And on the right, we've got a set of gloves which limit the range of movement in your fingers and thumbs, so they simulate kind of arthritic type conditions. And these are very good at engaging groups. It's a very active session. We give people everyday tasks to do, and then also online tasks using our actual services. And people do get a lot out of them, understanding how simple decisions can make things very difficult for some people. Now, obviously, during COVID, we haven't been able to run the sessions quite like this, but there are things that you can do remotely to run empathy sessions. There are role play games that you can use, and there are online simulators that you can use. And those, again, can be very useful for getting people engaged in the conversation, and then you can move on to some of the more technical discussions that follow. What I'd like to say about empathy sessions, though, is a little bit of a warning. You can sometimes get a bit of kickback from people, and they can accuse you of just playing at being disabled, which obviously is not a very respectful position to be in. But I do believe firmly that with care, empathy sessions can be very respectful and very valid. I think the importance is that you must acknowledge that these are just simulations. You are not giving people a true experience of being disabled. You're just giving them insight into the kinds of challenges and barriers that disabled people have. And secondly, it's important to be respectful of the people that you bring into the empathy sessions, because the last thing we want to do is leave people feeling distressed or distanced from disabled people because they don't know how to respond to the insight that they've given. And the key to that is making sure that you give them agency in some way to tackle accessibility, make things better for other people. And that's going to lead me into my second nudge, which is called agency. So on this table, what you'll see is across the top are 10 of our services at the DVSA that underwent external accessibility audits. And down the left-hand side, you'll see the common accessibility failings that we found when we compared all of those audits across all of the services. And very quickly, you'll see that the same kinds of problems come up for us again and again and again across services. So we call these the flashpoints. They're weaknesses that we have in our process at the moment, which mean that we're making the same kind of accessibility issues in our services. And what we've done to tackle this and give people agency around accessibility is put together a set of training courses that are training sessions that are specifically focused on people's disciplines. So we've run sessions for the content team, comms team, developers, designers, even our procurement team, and shown each of those teams what steps can they take to help us reduce the incidence of these flashpoints, so that hopefully eventually we'll clear this table and they won't be our common points of failure anymore. And another thing we're doing in this area is putting together a set of accessibility canvases. And these are sort of analysis tools, thinking tools that help us shift accessibility thinking as far left as we can. So it's baked in right from the start. We're not just finding the problems at the end and trying to fix them. So on to my next nudge then. This is the risk nudge. It goes down very well with managers. It certainly gets their attention. When we speak to more senior stakeholders, one of the most common questions we ask is, well, what is the worst that can happen if we don't address accessibility? And there are plenty of things that can happen. There's a lot of reputational risk, financial risk that can occur if you're found not to take action. And this was a case, it only happened a couple of weeks ago. A deaf woman who made a claim against the government because in the COVID briefings, there was no sign language interpreter. And she made the case that her health was put at risk and she was put under undue stress because she couldn't access this important information as quickly or as easily as everybody else. And the case was referred to the High Court, and the court found in her favour. And so now that's going on into the case that she's going to make from the government and some reparation made to her. And we can certainly expect these kind of stories to become more and more frequent. The disabled people's advocacy groups like Scope and a number of them are systematically exploring what local authorities and government are doing to make sure that citizen services are accessible to all, and they don't hold back when they report on their findings. So keep your eyes open. There'll be plenty of these kinds of stories, I predict, in the coming months. Again, something I want to say about risk is it is good for getting attention, but it's important, I think, not to dwell in the risk area. I think, again, to be productive and to take positive action, we need to move from just worrying about mitigating risk to actually finding the opportunities and exploiting those for positive effect. So my next nudge is all about progress. It's really important to show people that things are changing and that you're getting somewhere. And there's all sorts of progress indicators that you can use. I've got two here that we use, and I'm going to tell you about them in a moment. But again, I want to make a point that it's really important that you define your own goals and the steps that you're going to take to meet those goals, and therefore define the scales on your progress indicators. Ours might be helpful to you, but you really need to examine them and check that the scales match your where you need to be and how fast you can get there and what the steps are for you. So on the left, we just have a kind of dial indicator. It shows the progress that's being made on awareness around accessibility in the organisation, how far we're getting with empathy sessions, and then how we structure our accessibility work in the organisation. So I'll just talk you through two of those scales. So for awareness, well, they all start at 0, basically. And then for awareness, they go through ad hoc communications, regular timetabled communications, progress and communications that's silo-based, and then cross-organisational collaboration that leads to more holistic awareness. For empathy, the first stage is that people are engaged with disability personas or scenarios, then that they've actually experienced simulators or tried to use assistive technologies. The next step is that they've attended some accessibility testing and seen disabled people using services for real. And of course, the ultimate goal is that disabled users are actually involved in the service development. So quickly to move on to the other indicator, on the progress indicator on the right, this is one that we use to track how we're doing with our testing around accessibility. So it explicitly calls out automated testing and then manual testing across the disability continuum that we talked about earlier. This one's got quite a lot of steps. There are 10 different steps on our scale. And some of the points on there lower down is that accessibility checklists are used. A little bit better is that we actually do testing, but maybe it's only on an ad hoc basis. As we move up the scale, up our maturity and increase our impact, then we'll be regularly testing critical and frequent journeys. Another step is that those flashpoints that I showed you are regularly monitored so that we can see how we're doing against those. Another step is to have accessibility on the product roadmap. And of course, the ultimate, that will be the 10, is that we've got an end-to-end accessibility process adopted. Okay, so moving on then to the final of my nudges, I'm calling this Ubiquity. We have a communications channel on Teams, which is our internal communication and sharing tool. And we encourage people to submit examples where they found like accessibility howlers. And everybody loves to point and go, ooh, look what they did. So here's a couple of examples. On the left, Network Rail turned their site black and white in respect of Prince Philip's death. However, unwittingly, they actually rendered a large number of their input fields illegible because the text on the dark grey backgrounds could not be read. And on the right-hand side, we've got the World Health Organization with one of their COVID vaccination campaign posts with some very dubious colour choices and colour contrast issues here. So we regularly get these submitted. They're really great for keeping people coming back and looking and thinking about what can go wrong, particularly around digital accessibility. But I also want to say it's really important to share positive examples too. They're less easy to find, but when you find them, they're absolutely brilliant. And the most recent one we had, which is really lovely, was around a viewpoint in Naples over a bay. And the metal handrail that went around the edge of the viewing bay had a braille description of the view. Really, really lovely. And it's important to appeal, both to the shock side and the heart side, when people get it right. And that's a really nice, simple way of keeping awareness, up in people's minds. Okay, so we're going to move on in the final kind of section then to start talking about why accessibility should matter to you. And I've got 5 main reasons. So the first one is it's the law. So the public sector body accessibility regulations of 2018 mandated that all government services and web-based services and mobile applications must be accessible. And if they're not accessible, then we need to document exactly how they fail and what we're going to do about it and by when we're going to take that action. Now, the primary responsibility lies with the public sector bodies. However, if we deliver any service that integrates a third-party product or third-party service, then you can expect us to be asking those suppliers, what are they doing about the accessibility of their components that they give to us? What are their accessibility policies? Show us their accessibility processes. So if you work with government, it's going to be the law for you too, indirectly. The second reason you should be interested is it is cheaper. So the IBM Systems Method Lab estimated that it's anywhere between 10 and 100 times cheaper to fix accessibility earlier in the service lifecycle than later. And depending how far left you can shift it, you'll get the bigger cost benefit savings. And there are also all kinds of indirect cost savings to be had. So accessible products, web-based services, are inherently more findable. And accessibility work can also drive innovation because it can solve unanticipated problems. So text-to-speech and voice control, those were both originally accessibility tools, but obviously they found much broader application and allowed innovation for all sorts of companies now that integrate those into everyday products. So the third reason I think you should should care about accessibility is again around risk. So we talked about it earlier, and I'm just going to give you a statistic. This is from the US, but I think we can extrapolate the same kind of pattern to the UK as well. So the Wall Street Journal did some analysis and found that lawsuits around accessibility rose 64% in the first half of this year, 2021, compared to the same period last year. So there were 1,600 claims in the first 6 months of 2021 compared to 1,000 in the equivalent period last year. And this is a trend that I think we're going to see continue to rise, especially with continuing awareness. Okay, let's talk now about customers. Let's talk about them. So it's fairly obvious that age discriminatory products are going to discourage spending, and the Centre for Longevity actually dug into that a little bit. And they predict that if we tackled the barriers that stop older people using web-based services and all kinds of products, then we can expect a 2% increase in GDP by 2040. And that equates to a staggering £47 billion. So there is money in this issue. But more widely, that was just about age discriminatory products, but more widely, assessments have shown across 14 major markets that there is a pattern that around 50% of consumers are belief-driven buyers. So that means it's a really strong link between corporate social responsibility and trust and brand loyalty, and even some evidence of a price premium. So again, there's money to be had by doing this good stuff. And my final reason actually turns inwards to an organisation. So let's think about employees. So surveys by Deloitte and Gallup have found that new entrants into the labour market prioritise purpose over salary, and purpose directly drives engagement. And with increased engagement, you can expect, they've quoted statistics like 40% better retention, 20% better profitability. So values and beliefs are really important to employees, and the kinds of values that we're seeing people talk about are equality, inclusion, fairness, sustainability. So any action that can be taken to leverage that commitment can deliver benefits. So once again, I think we've come back to the point that accessibility is good for all. We've looked at ways to raise awareness and commitment to accessibility, and we've shown some ways that you can even quantify those benefits. So I'm going to finish on my final slide, which is, if you've been inspired by any of this, what can you do next? And I've got some summaries here. I've put together quite a detailed resource list, which I know the organisers are going to circulate. But there are meetups all over the place, mostly still digital, but eventually they'll come back to face-to-face. Accessibility Manchester and Accessibility Leeds are two shining examples of meetups that you can join. And from those, you will hear from such a broad range of organisations and all the different ways that they are working on accessibility. It's truly inspirational. Then almost every week, certainly every other week, there's a webinar somewhere about accessibility. Again, a really great way to level up your baseline understanding and get some really good tips and pointers about things that you can do in your organisation. There's many, many free training packages and tutorials. And some of the producers of the larger automated test tools open up their knowledge bases very generously. You'll find all kinds of white papers and technical discussions about accessibility. There's the simulators. I showed you those in the images before that you can use. And then there are just some great activities that you can just kick off and just start a discussion in your organisation. One that's really easy, and it's one of my favourites actually, is No Mouse Mondays. And you can just issue a challenge to people for an hour or half a day or even a whole day if they can, not to use their mouse, not to use their touchpad, just do their daily work just with keyboard navigation. And it soon opens up a huge range of insights into the kinds of challenges people have when some modes of interaction are closed off to them. So we'll just come back then. If you remember at the beginning, I asked you to think of the image that came to mind when you thought of a disabled person. And again, I'd like just to invite you to think about, has that image changed for you as a result of what you've heard this morning? Should it change? Can it change? Can you see some different things that you can build in to enrich that image and take a more holistic approach to accessibility? So that's all from me. Thank you very much. Very, very happy to answer questions. And so I think I'm going to hand back to Paul to help us manage those.
Yeah, so we've got a number of questions, and for those who haven't been before, what we normally do is we give you the opportunity to actually ask your question directly to Nichole. So I think the first question is from Richard Morton. So Richard, I'm going to put you live in a second, and you'll be able to ask your question to Nichole. So morning, Richard, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Nichole. That's really interesting, really good. I heard you speak before about this as well. It's really good. Yeah, my question was the first bit about the statements about designing for our future selves being better than one about not excluding disabled people. I just wondered how that equates to the sort of regular requests we get from people to say, please center disabled people in design. You know, I think it's a bit of a dynamic, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. I'd say, I think the point about designing for our future selves helps us all to actually participate in the discussion on an equal, more of an equal footing. And so it isn't a them and a us kind of discussion. So I think that takes us so far, it just gets us into interacting more equitably with people. But I agree with you completely. The best thing that we can do is get everybody who's affected or has access needs into the design process in some way, so that they can represent their experiences directly to the people who, well, to actually to participate in the design process alongside the experts who usually drive it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your question. The next question is from John Parsons. So John, I'm just going to put you onto live and you'll be able to ask your question directly to Nichole. Morning, John.
Morning.
Morning.
Hi, Nichole. Thanks for that. It was a really interesting talk, and I really liked some of the quotes you had in there. It did make me think. One of the things that I've been thinking recently with GDPR legislation is, as a tech community, we responded really positively to that new legislation, and we included or developed privacy by design. So we think about data protection and privacy in all systems as part of the initial build. But with accessibility legislation, we don't give it that same weight or reverence that it needs. And I like your term inclusion by design, and that doesn't seem to be something that's a thing. We still seem to be in that build first and fix second. And if accessibility had the same weight as the GDPR legislation, so say, for example, at the government organisation I work for, we all have to go through privacy training and data protection training, so we're aware of all the issues. If every staff member had to go through that same training, then we'd get the sort of thinking that your courses and experience days try to get across as well. But it's just what are the barriers to particularly developers thinking about accessibility by design?
Yes. So yeah, really, really great points. I firmly agree. I'd love to see accessibility as part of the mandatory training that everybody goes through. I think it would deliver huge benefits. I think that the public sector body regulations have really ramped up the commitment to accessibility in government, so that really helps. And it's not quite on the level footing with GDPR, as you mentioned, but it's certainly getting the higher profile. Then to the last point you made, so the barriers to developers. I have to be careful not to slur developers here. You have to take a different approach, I think. Developers like to fix things, and the training session that we ran with the developers took 10 very common things that go wrong on a page that result in accessibility issues, and looked at, what can you do, what simple code tweaks can you do, what standards should you have that you might forget, and I'll show you them and you go, oh yeah, but they get forgotten, and let's just make those more uppermost in people's minds, make them a habit almost, and keeping it simple and keeping it really specific to how you can fix something or how you can stop having to go back and fix it later. In fact, that was a really strong point, because we'd just been through a big long period of doing fixes after our audit, and they had hated it. And to be able to say to them, well, look, if we build in some of these things in everything that we talk about, you won't have to go back again and touch somebody else's code and fix something that has been done long before. And that was a really good hook for them.
Just adding to that, Nichole, as well, I think some of those sessions that you had, like as the awareness sessions, I think from an outside perspective, they seem to have quite a big impact on people as well.
Thank you for reminding me. There was a brilliant one where we did have some developers and a screen reader, and we put a piece of cardboard over the screen and got them to use, just basically do a very simple little journey that they had coded. And it was just to put in 2 values into 2 fields on a page and navigate some various contexts. And through the screen reader, they could not identify where they were on the page. They could not identify what was being announced. There was a license code that was read out by the screen reader. They had no idea what it was when they just heard it that way. So giving them that insight was really, really useful. And again, very quickly their mind turned to, what can I do to fix it? So yeah, that was they did respond really well to that empathy session. Thanks, Paul, for that nudge.
No, it was good. I just remember from an external perspective, that's a brilliant idea. We need to do more of that. Thank you very much, John, for your question. The next question we've got.
Sorry.
Yvette? Sorry?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, because obviously you've mentioned it's law for the public sector, but is there anything for the private sector as well?
Not yet to the same level, but there is in the US, and I imagine that with time it will come to us too. I mean, there is always the Equality Act, which does apply to everybody, but it's harder to find the case under that sometimes. But the public sector body regulations are quite strong in what they urge us to do.
I guess one thing, just before we move on, was including kind of accessibility in terms of definition of done. I know that's something that I think we spoke about a while ago. Is that something that you've managed to kind of embed at DVSA, or is it still something we're working on? Working on. It's easier to get it. It's easiest when it's limited to just running an automated test. Parts of the organisation have got automated tests in their test harness, and it just runs automatically, and therefore it's part of done. But that only takes us so far. But it's a good win. We'll take that win for a while, but it's still ongoing work to first of all extend that to all groups, and secondly ramp it up a little bit so it's not just automated testing that they think. Which does good, but it doesn't do as much good as manual testing and some other processes that we can put in place. Great. Okay, and we got another question from Johnny Orr. So just give me a second, Johnny, and you'll be able to. You should be able to now speak. Good morning, Johnny.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. So you can ask Nichole your question.
Thank you. Yeah. So my question is more around exceptions. So with the agency I work with, we do some national government work. It's mostly with the Welsh government, actually, and we just completed a huge project. We did a very detailed kind of accessibility statement on it. And there were some small exceptions when we were shooting for AA compliance. And I just wondered, Nichole, around how do you make the decision on what is an acceptable exception to accessibility within a project, in particular websites, and what should be recoded and put back into dev? And is that decision more based around severity, or more based on UI and UX, please, Nichole?
That's quite a tricky question.
It is, sorry.
So the regulation is very clear, and actually I might loop Richard Morton in to help answer this, because he actually is part of the part of government that assesses how well we're all doing in our state.
Okay, cool.
Shall I allow Richard to speak as well?
Yeah, let's please.
Yeah. So what's your view on this, Richard?
In terms of the regulations, as Nichole was just about saying, it's fairly clear that you have to meet all the requirements. There isn't sort of distinction between the severity levels. There isn't a distinction between whether something is more used than other things. So unfortunately, the regulations are pretty black and white on this. Pragmatically, though, it's more important to look at things from a sort of severity point of view and consider things like the level A, level AA success criteria. Some are more important than others. It's about priorities in terms of investment, how much time you've got, how much resources you've got. There's a lot of practical things about it, but there isn't, there's nothing in the regulations which says, oh, you can ignore this. It basically, if you do ignore something, you're at risk. You're at legal risk. That's more or less all I can say on that thing.
Is there any kind of get out of jail clauses? I mean, so for example, I know during lockdown we were engaging with schools through their websites primarily, and I don't know if anybody else has got kids and tried to access their school's websites, but they're horrendous in the experience that I've had. And whilst that's maybe not seen as like a direct public service, it is kind of a government-based thing. Or what happens in those kinds of instances where maybe it isn't, a .gov, but it's something which is related to maybe a local authority or something like that? How does that work then?
Most of the public sector is covered by the regulations. There are some exemptions. Schools have limited exemptions that they only have to make accessible certain aspects of their services, but most other parts of the public sector are a part of the regulations. There's debates about whether universities are sort of public sector or private sector. So it can get a bit tricky in terms of people knowing whether they are or not. We're obviously still encouraging people to think about this, not from the point of view of legal requirements, but the point of view that this is the right thing to do. And all the points that Nichole raised earlier about engagement and, you know, people don't have a choice with most public services. They have to go to a particular provider, whether that's central government, local government, universities, their local council, all those things.
Great, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard. So I think we're just about out of questions. I guess from my perspective, Nichole, I've got a question in terms of you know, the different things that you've been doing over the last few years. Which are the things that you think have had the most impact?
So I think actually starting up the working group has had the biggest impact, because we've now got, I think, nearly 80 people from different parts of the organisation regularly talking about accessibility, sharing resources, helping each other out, just actually finding somebody else in the same position is really helpful. So that has really joined it up across the agency. So yeah, setting that up, I think, has been the biggest gain that we've had. And we've actually got one of the directors attending the next meeting, which is really great to hear what we're discussing, what our thoughts are, where we're struggling to make progress, and what they might be able to do to help us.
Oh, that's great. So thank you very much for sharing your insights there. I really enjoyed it. We've had some brilliant feedback in the channel and some really interesting questions at the end of the session. So thank you very much for presenting with us today. And thank you, everybody, for coming this morning. I'm always surprised to see anybody this early on a Thursday morning. We have got another session next month on Thursday, the 30th of September. And it's likely to be around data visualization. So something a little bit different to accessibility, but hopefully we can see you there. So that's the end. Thank you very much, and hope to see you all again soon.